What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John. And this week we are back with another episode where we will be analyzing and predicting the UFC on ESPN Plus 21 card headline by Zabit Magomed-Sharipov versus Calvin Kattar. This 13-fight card will take place in Moscow, Russia this Saturday, November 9th, 2019, with the 7-fight prelim card starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, with the 6-fight main card starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So I had my man Ozzy join me last week on the podcast. The episode went well. I had a lot of fun, got some great reviews of it, and decided to have Ozzy back on for the podcast this week. He was eager to join us again, and I was happy to have him. So what's up, Ozzy? Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me. Had a great time last week recording and had great picks. I think overall, I didn't tally up your record, but I think on the picks I had last week, 8-4, including that big Corey Anderson win. Had like 7.5 units on him. Also, had Till and just great card top to bottom last week. Hopefully, we can replicate it here. This week in Russia, and happy to be here to break down a bunch more fights.
Yeah, I think you definitely did better than I did. I think we disagreed on Dawadu. I think I got that one right. You were right about Good. You were right about Anderson. We both were wrong about Gillespie. And it was a great card though. I'm sure you had a lot of fun. It was a crazy pay-per-view. I don't talk about the cards too much, but real quick, what was your reaction in the arena to the stoppage in the UFC 244 between Masvidal and Diaz before we get rolling with this Moscow card?
So yeah, I was watching. I think I was on like the second level, and I couldn't tell. I don't, by that time, I don't think I was paying too much attention to the TV and seeing the how big those cuts were that Diaz had. So initially, I thought, what they should have kept it going. But then when they were standing kind of in the middle of the cage and they were did a close up on that eyebrow, I think it was a fine stoppage. It sucks that it happened, but. Diaz is getting obliterated in there, and I think the end was inevitable, and I think it was a fair stoppage after seeing the cut a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the doctor said it wasn't just the cut. I mean, he said it was an overall assessment of Diaz, and that makes sense because the referee was concerned about Diaz. He told the commission after round 2 that he wants to keep an eye on them, and it wasn't just the cut. I mean, the neurologist definitely noticed some signs from Diaz that things weren't right, and everybody acted like it was just the cut and saying the fight could have gone on is dead wrong. You got to trust the doctor's opinion on this one. I think that he was definitely right to stop the fight. It was a absolute beatdown from Masvidal, and it was a good stoppage. So just had a quick note on that because it was a bit of a controversial subject from the past few weeks. But with that being said, we will jump right into the first fight of the evening, which takes place in the bantamweight division. We got Grigory Popov, who is 14-3, taking on Davy Grant, who is 8-4. The opening betting line for this one was Popov minus 230, Grant plus 170. Right now, we are seeing the line staying about the same with a little more action coming in on Grant. We see Popov minus 190, Grant plus 165. So, Ozzy, what is your stance on the more action coming in on the dog Grant's way in this one?
I can certainly understand not wanting to lay a number, close to 2-1 with a guy like Popov, who's in his second UFC fight, and he did get finished in his first fight when he fought Wineland. But Wineland is a proven vet, has power, a lot of power in his hands, and he ate a lot of shots from Wineland in that fight. I thought, if I'm remembering the fight well, I had that first round pretty close, pretty even, and then Wineland really started connecting. Here against Grant, though, I know Popov trains over at Tiger Muay Thai, so I assume his ground game is going to be up to snuff. But Grant's shown a little bit of a desire to grapple in the past. I think he'll definitely have to do that here. But against Popov, I think he's going to be at a pretty big speed disadvantage overall. And if Popov could get those leg kicks and body kicks going, I think Grant is going to have a tough time putting together enough offense to get him a win here. So I definitely no bet for sure, dog or pass at this price. I don't think there's really value on either side for the most part. If you want to maybe, try to look at a prop, maybe the over there or something of that nature, but better, I feel much better just stay away. Don't know too much about these guys. Grant's been, very inactive. He's fought, I think, 3 times in the last like 3 or 4 years, not very active at all. And Popov is 35, just getting to the UFC, and beat a lot of regional subpar competition to get to the UFC. So, I would definitely not lay that number with him. He's really improving, but Grant's definitely not getting my money either. So that's how I feel about it. Pretty, a fight that I think is a coin flip. So if you take Grant, good luck to you. But my pick would be Popov here.
Yeah, I'm right with you. No bet on this one. I guess I agree with the early action coming in on Grant because uh, it's just dog or pass. I mean, you can't trust Popov at that 2-1 number, like you said multiple times. And I think Popov will win the fight. I think he's the more capable fighter. Even though he lost to Wineland, he showed some decent things in that fight. His boxing defense looked pretty bad, but the dude can take a shot. He took an absolute beating before he got knocked out. And it's hard to see Grant landing those same type of hard shots. So it's going to be hard for Grant to knock off Popov. It's going to be hard for Grant to out-volume Popov on the feet. And I'd say Grant's really only path to victory is the submission. And Popov's ground game is not very good. He does have some submissions over lower level competition, and I think that his ground game will be solid enough to avoid the submission in this one, keep the fight standing. And standing, I think Popov will be the much better striker. I think he will start getting his kicks going. He's got nice body kicks and eventually get his hands going as well. I mean, Grant's last fight was against Manny Bermudez, where he got dropped with a right hand 30 seconds into the fight and got put out with a triangle. And he's only 1-3 in his entire UFC career, spanning over 4 or 5 years. Very inactive. Doesn't look to be too committed to fighting at this point. And I think that Popov is just a much better fighter. So even though I'm pretty confident in Popov in this one, I wouldn't be rushed into the betting window to lay that -190 on him. Although I do think he wins this fight via decision. We could even see a knockout from Popov in this one. So the pick is going to be Popov. Next fight in the women's bantamweight division, we got Jessica Rose Clark, who is 9-5, taking on Pannie Kianzad, who is 11-5. The opening betting line for this one was Kianzad, the underdog, at +140 to Rose Clark as the -180 underdog. Right now, we are seeing near pick'em with Rose Clark at -115 to Kianzad at -105. So this is a rematch. These two fought back in Invicta, I think 4 years ago, and Pannie Kianzad won that fight 30-27. So very interesting to see that Rose Clark opened the -180 favorite in this one. So in this rematch, who you think is going to win this one, Ozzy?
Good, good women's fight here. I think both girls here have some talent, have some skill. Rematch, as you said. I like Jessica Rose Clark where the line is now at that opening number that you said. I think -190. For sure, the dog was a side now there. Now that it's basically a pick'em though, I like Rose Clark. She's coming off a layoff of almost a year and a half after losing to Jessica Eye. And in that fight, I thought that she looked okay. She just wasn't really extremely aggressive, as aggressive as she was in like the fight against Beck Rawlings or the fight against Paige Van Zant. And she really let Eye dictate the pace of that fight. But that was also down at 125. And I saw I've read a lot of stuff since then with her kind of commenting on how she was really killing herself to get down to 125. She wasn't, really happy at that point. And I think she's taken this year and a half or so to really get to a better place where she's, if you just look at her Instagram, she looks like she's in phenomenal shape, even though she's up 10 pounds. She's ripped. She's training with a really, really good fight, a good team, and I think she's in a good place. And I've always thought that Jessica Rose Clark was talented, and had some good skills and utilized, a good transition. She had a good transition game, which you see lacking a lot of times in the in those female divisions. And on the other end, Kizad. she was on the Ultimate Fighter, got some wins on on the show, and in her last fight ran into a girl in Julia Villa who I'm high on, and I don't discredit, I don't lower her down for losing to her there. But I think in this fight, Jessica Rose Clark is the better striker at range. I think she's going to be faster, and I think she's going to be able to keep this on the feet for the most part. And even if not, I feel she is pretty good in scrambles and ending up on top, and focusing on that. Whereas a lot of other female fighters sometimes, go to their back or give up top position. So in this fight, I think Rose Clark keeps on the feet, uses her range finders. She has some good leg kicks, mixes up in her jab to mask them, and I think she'll be able to start pulling away in the fight and eventually win by decision here. So Rose Clark's the pick here. Fairly confident. I did bet 1.1 units on her when she was at that minus 110, and I think she gets it done here. But it's gonna be a close fight, right? It's a pick 'em for a reason. How do you feel between these two girls on who's gonna come out on top?
I'm actually going to come in the other way and pick Kianzad to win this decision in this one. And I think that if you look at their first fight, they're both much different fighters than that they were in that fight. It was a pretty sloppy contest. The first like 3.5 minutes of the fight were just all against the clinch, against the fence in the clinch. Nothing was happening. And then eventually Kianzad was landing some nice takedowns and kept top position. There was not much clean striking, and both of them really showed their inexperience at the time. I think since then, actually, Rose Clark has improved a bit more, and Kianzad has plateaued a little bit. But with that being said, I still think that Kianzad is the better striker at range, so I'm going to disagree with what you said there. I saw the way that I was landing on Rose Clark at range, and we know how rudimentary eye striking is, and I think that Kianzad has a lot more tools in this one. I think that her lead left hand will be a big punch that'll be landing a lot, and I think that she will probably look to initiate the clinch and get the takedowns again, because that's where she's had such a big advantage the first time they fought. But I think she will realize that Rose Clark has actually gotten a lot better in the grappling since then, and the takedowns won't come nearly as easily. So I think this one will play out on the feet a little bit more, and I think that Rose Clark will look better than she did versus Eye. It'll be more similar to her performances versus Paige Van Zandt and Rawlings, like you mentioned. I think she will look a lot better, but I think that Kianzad will just be landing the harder strikes in this fight. I think that extra 10 pounds difference will show in this one. I think Kianzad actually fought at the 145-pound tough. I could be wrong about that one, but she's got, I think she'll have a bit of size over Rose Clark in this one, and I think that size will play into her factor when she's landing the bigger strikes on the feet in this one to sway those judges' scorecards. So should be a pretty close fight. The early action on Kianzad at that plus money was definitely the right side. I wouldn't go laying money on a favorite on either side in this one, but I'm going to pick Kianzad to get the win. And it's honestly kind of shocking that this line is so close. A lot of people are really trusting Rose Clark and the improvements that she made to overcome that 30-27 loss to Kianzad earlier in her career. And anything you want to rebuttal on what I said now, Ozzy, because we're different in opinion here?
You were right that Kianzad did fight on that 145-pound Ultimate Fighter. I don't think that her shots or her takedowns are particularly strong, and I think how Rose Clark has looked in the past and what I think she's bringing up to the 135-pound division, I think it's going to be really, really hard for someone like Kianzad and like the style of takedown she goes for and how she sets them up to consistently get this to the ground. And even on the ground, I think I feel like Clark's going to have the better cardio, and if there are prolonged grappling exchanges, it's going to end up being to her favor and not her detriment. And I think I just see her wearing Panny out, Kianzad out, and getting this win here.
Yeah, and Rose Clark has also started training at CSA pretty recently, and I forget the name of the head coach there, but he's a really good striking coach and has been improving a lot of the fighters lately. So that's definitely in her favor. I'd say that once more that Rose Clark's definitely the more improved, and I think she has a lot of upside in this matchup. But we're going to move on to the next fight in the lightweight division, where we have Alexander Yakovlev, who is 25-9-1, taking on Roosevelt Roberts, who is 8-1. The opening betting line for this one was Roberts -165, Yakovlev +125. Right now, we are seeing Roberts -155, Yakovlev +135. So, line staying about the same in this one. I'm actually kind of surprised at this line being -155 Roberts. I think it would have been maybe more like -200. Do you think that Roberts should be more of a favorite in this fight, Ozzy?
Right. I don't actually. So I how I look at this fight, Roberts, he is, really dynamic. He's pretty powerful. I feel he gets by more on his strength and his athleticism and his, attributes than pure technique. Now, I've seen if you saw that guillotine he hit on Daryl Horcher, awesome guillotine, put himself in the perfect position to finish that. But I feel he's good with that technique, but what he leans on more and the technique that he chooses often are the techniques where he can accentuate his physical advantages, like that guillotine. Like he's able to wrap up the neck and go for them. But I feel like Alexander Yakovlev, he's just fought so much better competition, the much better competition here. Whereas Roosevelt-Roberts, like the guys that he has fought of late, that he's been able to get on the ground, were really, really subpar. And you saw in his last fight against Pichel, I was really disappointed with his performance. I thought that he was going to go out there and handle Pichel in a similar manner that maybe like Gillespie did, or I thought he was going to ground Pichel and end up finishing him by sub. But once Pichel started fighting back, and I think Robert saw that this is a veteran and it's a guy that's not going away, he kind of folded and he kind of cracked under their pressure, I feel, and made Pichel look really good there, and it was definitely was a good performance by him. But I really didn't expect that. He went to decision with Thomas Gifford, who we saw Mike Davis just absolutely destroy a few weeks back, and then that Horcher fight, and obviously the fight on Dana White Contender Series. Now Yakovlev, on the other hand, I think is a good neutralizer to some stuff that Roberts do. He's extremely hard to submit or get into like those positions, because he's such a kind of squirrely grappler. He's really good in some of those wrestling exchanges now, and I think this is definitely going to be a fight that plays out a lot in the clinch and definitely goes to the ground often. I'm curious to see how active Yakovlev is going to be on his feet, because I assume that Roberts is going to be very aggressive here. But yeah, I really don't like, similar to last week, guys really young in their UFC careers going against, proven, I have to go, quotation marks, proven vets like Yakovlev, or last week how it was Walker versus Anderson. I really don't like laying juice on guys that are so young in their UFC career. So for me, I think the guys that got Yakovlev at +150 and +160 in the middle of this week definitely are on the right side. And I would not be running to bet Roberts at this price. I wouldn't be betting him until he maybe got to like -130 or -135. So for me, it's dog or pass here. I don't have a real big lean, so I'm definitely going to be passing on this fight unless, like I said, there's a huge change in the prices. I think these guys are rather similar, and if Roberts, his best case scenario, I think, in his career is to become an athletic version of Alexander Yakovlev. So at this point, my pick would be Yakovlev to win.
Yeah, so I'm gonna come in the other way again with saying that Roberts is gonna pull this one off, and I understand some of your concerns about Roberts. He does, I think, fight a little lackadaisical at times. I mean, he kind of coasted to a decision victory over Thomas Gifford, and I was actually picking Paichol in that fight before in that Roberts' last fight. I thought that the pressure and the wrestling was going to get to him, which it did, but I kind of see what you meant. He kind of wilted to the pressure a little bit. He couldn't, I mean, it wasn't like an overwhelming pressure and wrestling effort from Paichol. It was a good effort and a good performance, but I think that he should have probably been able to win that fight, and the fact that he wasn't is probably going to be his ceiling in the UFC. But I still think he's good enough to beat Yakovlev here, because Yakovlev's last fight, I mean, he looked like a guy coming off of a long layoff. He looked like he wasn't in the swing of things on the feet. He looked kind of stiff. I never thought his striking was too good. I mean, he's always kind of relied on his grappling, although most of his losses have come by way of submission. So he's kind of a weird fighter. And that fight versus Silva, he was actually losing that fight, I'm pretty sure, for the first 6 or 7 minutes, just defending takedowns the entire time. Got taken down a few times. And then Silva maybe gassed out, maybe made a bad mental mistake and just got his neck snatched in a guillotine. It was a really weird fight. I don't think that anything good came out of that fight for Yakovlev. I'd actually say that it more confirmed some of the things, the suspicions I had before his last fight, and that he would not look good athletically. And I think he's just getting one more fight here in Russia. I don't think this matchup fares well for him. I think that Roberts would be the much better striker on the feet at range. He should be boxing Yakovlev up. He definitely has the better kicking game of the two. And in the grappling, it should be pretty competitive because Yakovlev has very solid defensive grappling. He's gone to a decision with Damian Maia, and even though I mentioned he has been submitted a few times, like guys like Zach Cummings, not the highest level grapplers, but serviceable guys. I just think that Roberts is a much more athletic fighter. He'll be the better striker, and I think that he will be able to avoid getting submitted on the ground. Although I think the grappling exchanges could be pretty close in this one, and we might see Roberts put in some bad spots like Peichel did to him. But I think that I'm trusting Roberts to stay off his back, to avoid the submission, to use his length and his striking advantage to win this one on the scorecards. It could be a bit difficult as well because Roberts tends to be a little low output, lackadaisical, like I mentioned at the beginning. And this is going to be a Russian fighter in Russia, and you're going to have to beat him decisively to win the scorecards. But I'm still trusting Roberts to do so. I have not locked in a bet on him yet, although I am considering it. I'm probably more capping close to minus 200 in this spot. You got anything yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure it's going to be a dirty fight that's contested in the clinch a lot, and either way, I think it'll be close. I don't really see Roberts being able to put Yakovlev away quickly, but I think that Yakovlev could make this fight dirty, tire Roberts out. We haven't really seen Roberts in get be on the receiving end of a lot of volume or a prolonged fight, where I think he had to push. He went 3 rounds with Gifford, but Gifford wasn't really offering anything in that Pichel fight. I think he did start slowing down. So Yakovlev, I think if he can extend this fight out, he can start to take advantage of some position. I think Roberts goes for the submission often, but he's there to be submitted too. And I think Yakovlev is a pretty opportunistic grappler. I think the submission is a big in play right here. I think both these guys will be hunting for that. But hopefully you put in a good performance, good fight, and we get a back and forth affair. I'd be curious to see the live betting odds on this after round 1.
Yeah, to your point, I think Yakovlev's submission opened up at like 1,200, so that might be a good prop stab or something. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have the debut of Abubakar Nurmagomedov taking on David Zawada. Nurmagomedov is 15-2-1. Zawada is 16-5. The opening betting line for this one is Nurmagomedov minus 245 to Zawada at plus 175. And right now, over on Best Fight Odds, we are seeing Nurmagomedov minus 320 to Zawada at plus 260. So do you think that Nurmagomedov would be as much of a favorite in the spot as he is if his name weren't Nurmagomedov? Or do you think that name value is kind of buying into this line a little bit?
For sure a little bit. I think it'd be naive to think that that wasn't the case. Now, yeah, and this is, I think, Khabib's. I don't know if it's his brother or his cousin. It's one of the two. But
Cousin.
so cousin, okay. So Zawada, I've really enjoyed both fights that he's had in the UFC. I was on him in that Roberts fight, and I was so disappointed because they were just going back and forth so much. There's a few positions where I thought Zawada could really stick him and get to a finish in some of those grappling exchanges. And in that Jin Liang fight, like it was that was a war, great fight. But he ended up getting finished there. I just feel that Zawada is accepting a bit of some of these grappling exchanges, and he's for sure a crafty grappler. but against Nurmagomedov, he really is able to control guys on the mat, and it's not just the stigma of me saying that from knowing that he's Khabib's brother. He's really been able to hold down a lot of guys pretty easily, and you know, I think that once his fight does hit the mat, Nurmagomedov is going to be able to have his way on down there. On the feet, Zawada's for sure tricky. He throws all strikes. Like, he's good with his hands. He's good with his kicks. He's got 11 wins by knockout, and which is, you know, a ton. He's knocked out some UFC level guys along the way. And you know, I think he can make something happen on the feet. So if I was to be betting him, I think I would be looking for like an inside the distance kind of prop. Because I think if this fight goes 3 rounds, I think Nurmagomedov starts wearing him out and extend like building on the grappling advantage that he has and the tighter position that he has. So I would be betting him inside the distance. But I think this will be a good scrap. I don't think Zawada is going to get blown out in the beginning, but I feel as the fight goes along, he's going to start getting chipped away on, and eventually those takedowns will start coming easier.
Yeah, I agree with for the most part with everything you said. I mean, Nurmagomedov is pretty much a lay and pray artist. I mean, he does have some pretty decent striking technique on the feet, although his defense is not very good. He got dropped by Kush and tapped out in his most recent loss. And I think that this fight will probably be like Nurmagomedov going for takedowns, trying to keep top position. And Zawada does have some crafty escapes from bottom, and he goes for a lot of submissions, but he's not a positionally sound grappler. He just tries to go for leg locks and snatch necks and arms whenever he can, and he doesn't really establish a dominant position. So I would be really surprised to see Nurmagomedov caught with any type of submission in this one. I'd say Zawada's main path to victory would be touching the chin of Nurmagomedov on the feet. Maybe if he doesn't screw around with trying to get submissions and just focuses on getting right back up to his feet, I honestly think he could keep this fight standing long enough to land that hard strike on Nurmagomedov's chin and possibly rock him, put him out, or maybe even just sway the judges' scorecards each round. But it's really hard to predict that from what we've seen. Like you said, Zawada tends to accept these grappling exchanges a little bit too much, and that those were versus 2 less skilled grapplers than Nurmagomedov. Maybe he'll come in here a bit more calculated and have a good game plan to beat Nurmagomedov, but definitely a bit underwhelmed with Nurmagomedov from what I've seen from his PFL fights. I think that he will get Zawada down, get enough top position to win the rounds, but I'm not impressed with his gas tank. I'm not impressed with his defense, his output, anything really. So I don't think that Abubakar will have a really illustrious UFC career, but I think that he will be good enough to beat Zawada in this one. Although I will probably be, from a fan standpoint, cheering for Zawada to get this fight back to the feet, because I think he does have the chance at landing the knockout on the feet. But the pick is going to be Nurmagomedov by decision.
Like you said, I really do hope that Zawada is smart enough to not be just trying to go for submissions once he hits the ground. And if he's trying to get back up, which I think is the smartest strategy, I think he increases his chances here. But I'm going to pick Nurmagomedov as well.
Nice. So in the next fight so a bit of discrepancy on this one. Tapology says 205, although some other people have been saying 185 pounds, but this fight is taking place at 185 pounds. We got Roman Kopylov making his UFC debut, who is 8-0, taking on Karl Roberson, who is 8-2. The opening betting line for this one was Roberson, the plus 150 underdog, to Kopylov as the minus 190 favorite. Right now, we are seeing a pick'em at Roberson minus 110, Kopylov minus 110. So Kopylov making his UFC debut here. I think that opening line was very whack at him minus 190. That's why you saw that action come back in on Roberson. So what's your read of Kopylov so far? What have you seen on tape, Ozzy?
So I watched his last few fights where he went later on into the fight, and I think he finished in the 4th round in his last 2 fights. I was impressed. I thought that I think he's a good fighter. He's a southpaw has a diversity of strikes, throws strong kicks. Doesn't work is grappling too much. So you don't really know what you have there. But I thought he had, his hands look pretty fast, and he was durable, right? He didn't really get hit with too many big shots. But the guys that we were fighting were, especially his last fight, a guy was, a little slower, a little, less physical. So he kind of had his way with him, and the end was inevitable. In this fight with Roberson's a really, 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 high level athlete in the cage. His fight last time out against Turman was an interesting one, to say the least. Roberson for sure had the standing striking edge, but they did end up on the mat pretty often. But Roberson, to his credit, was able to survive down there, get out of a few bad positions on a guy in Turman who I rate his grappling pretty highly. I was actually impressed by a lot of the transitions that he was hitting, but it's a little concerning that Roberson was pressing the grappling so much. I think in this fight, that line movement was right on the money and right on point. I started looking at this fight a little late. I would have even played Roberson at that like plus 110 to plus 120 range, but by the time I got to it, it was even money, and we had lost a lot of the value, around 3% or so of the value, and now it's a pick 'em at minus 110 each side. So I don't really have too much of a affinity to dabble at that price, because I don't think there's enough value. I think both guys here will focus on the feet, will be exchanging with each other. Roberson, hopefully probably looking to initiate, and Kopylov a little more on the counter. But I think this is a fight where Roberson actually could maybe use his grappling a little more and take this fight to the mat and end up in top position, because on top he has some really strong ground and pound. He's training with Corey Anderson as well over there, so his wrestling is pretty good. I think if this fight hits the ground, it's because he wants it to, and I think he could do some damage from that top position, and that's a position we really haven't seen Kopylov too much. We haven't seen him on his back, so we don't know really what he looks like. So I'm kind of siding more to pick Roberts in this fight, Roberson, excuse me, in this fight. But I'm right on the edge, as like kind of the odds indicate. My official pick will probably be him, because I think the only you've seen him struggle when guys are dictating the pace on him and putting him on the mat, and I don't think that's something that Kopylov is going to be able to do. And on the feet, I think he'll be able to get in this bag and land, because he's the faster, quicker fighter, and he's more active. Kopylov is pretty low volume on the feet. Did you how did you feel about Roberson? We have a good amount of UFC tape on him, so I'm sure you're able to catch up with a few of his fights. What do you think of his skills?
Yeah, I like Roberson in this spot too. I thought Kopylov looks very solid. From what I've seen, I did watch his most recent few fights. Both of his most recent two fights have been scheduled for 5 rounds, and he won both of them by TKO in the 4th round. So he's got a good pace. I wouldn't say good pressure. Like he doesn't pressure his opponents and throw a lot of volume. He just paces himself and slowly picks apart his opponents. But I don't think that's a good sign in this fight, because Roberson's going to have a big power advantage on the feet, and Kopylov kind of likes picking his opponents apart and throwing a lot of shots to the body and winning the fight late. But it seemed like Kopylov had his past a few opponents beat like very early on in the fight, and just took his good old time beating them. It was kind of weird how he did so. I mean, that's just his style, I guess. He prefers not to take too many risks and wear them down, and it's worked out pretty well so far. But I mean, he's going to have an aggressive Roberson marching forward at him, throwing heavy strikes, and he definitely is going to have the power and strength advantage. Kopylov looks looks a little skinny and lanky from what I've seen from him on tape. All of his opponents did. Maybe it's just the camera angles from ACB or FNG or the Russian promotions he's coming from, but Roberson, I think, is going to have a big size advantage in this one. And we really haven't seen Kopylov initiate too much grappling. He easily stuffed some sloppy takedowns from Shokolo in their fight, but not much defensive grappling from him. No offensive grappling from what I recall. And I think that Roberson could possibly maybe out grapple him in this spot. Look for those takedowns and Roberson really, I mean, he had a tough fight his last fight versus Turman. Like you said, I think he won rounds 1 and 2, but he spent a lot of time on bottom. He was got his back take a few times, but he's pretty solid defensively in the grappling scheme of things. He only's been really subbed by high level grapplers like Mutanche and Teixeira, and I don't think that. I certainly don't think Kopylov will be able to submit him just from we haven't seen him grapple much. He's more of a striker. So I think this one will be on the feet. I think Roberson will have a bit of a speed and power advantage. I trust him to land the harder, cleaner shots. And I'm not impressed with Kopylov's boxing, defense, or offense. And I think there's a chance that Roberson touches the chin in this one. So I'm going to go with Roberson to get the second round knockout. Not really too confident of a pick in the knockout. It could be a decision. It could be a little bit of a low output where they give Kopylov the cards possibly. But I think Roberson does touch the chin, land that hard shot, and get the knockout in this one. So the pick is going to be Roberson. And the next fight, we are moving on to the lightweight division. We have Rustam Khabilov taking on Sergey Khandozko. Another fight where it says 155 on Tapology, but it says 170 on UFC.com. I think 170 is correct for this one. I don't know if you have any insight into this, Ozzy, but we got Khabilov.
I believe that's right. Yeah, I think it's.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure it's 170.
nice. We got Khabilov 23-4 taking on Khandozko 27-5-1. The opening betting line for this one was Khabilov the minus 210 favorite, Khandozko plus 160. Right now, the line is Khabilov minus 210 to Khandozko at plus 175. So I'm pretty shocked at this opening line. What are you thinking about this one, Ozzy?
I I the two guys that are Khabilov has had so many fights in the UFC, and he's always been hanging around, and you wonder, if there's ever a time where he's going to fall off a lot, but so far so good, right? Sergey, I'm gonna go with Sergey to say his name. I wasn't that impressed with his debut against Akhman. Akhman was able to hang around in the fight and escape a lot of positions on the feet. I mean, like there was a few times where, I felt that the fight was there for Sergey to start, controlling and dominating, and Akhman wouldn't allow it. So that put me kind of off him a little bit. Rustam, Khabilov, on the other hand, he lost his last fight to Diego Ferreira, and I feel Diego Ferreira is for sure like easy top 15 guy. Would beat a lot of guys in the UFC. At that in the lightweight division if he got a shot. And other than that, he's only lost to a few other guys like Ben Henderson, Adriano Martins, and I don't see Sergey posing too many threats. Like he's a longer striker, which Khabilov has sometimes been neutralized by. Like I feel in the Cajun Johnson fight, which was a robbery. I think Cajun was should have got that fight if I remember right. This card is in Russia though again, so remember that. I feel like Rustam a lot of times maybe waits a little bit too long on the outside and doesn't initiate as much. So if Sergey is able to keep this fight long, I think he wins, but he might win. But I think Khabilov is going to be able to take him down and hold him down here. And I would imagine that he would win, but there's no way that I'm putting money on either of these two guys in this fight. I don't think that there's any value on either of their lines. So I think it's pure gambling if you are. But some people love to do that, right? Do you? So it sounds like you have a stronger opinion than I do on this fight. So I'm curious to hear what that might be.
Sorta. I don't have a very confident read in the outcome of the fight. I just think that there is actually value on Khandozko. I think that Khabilov, his past two fights you mentioned, Cajun Johnson, a very decent fighter, good grappler, was able to stuff takedowns, outstrike him, and land the better positions. And then you really gave credit to Carlos Diego Ferreira, who I agree is seriously one of the best lightweights in the world right now, one of the most underrated guys in the roster. And I think that Khabilov relies on those takedowns. He relies on the suplex, those explosive movements, and that fades as you get older. And I think that we're kind of seeing him fade in front of us. I think his shots are looking a little slower. He's not getting as many takedowns as he used to. At one point, he used to average like tons of takedowns a fight and was super dominant. Has kind of fallen away from that in his past few fights, and was not impressed by Khandoz either in his debut versus Akman. He really won that fight in like the last 10 seconds of the fight. It was I think Khandoz won round one. I think he rocked Akman in round two. I think Khandoz actually got rocked in round two himself, and then in round three, it was a really close round and back and forth. And I think Khandoz closed the round, landed in a few good strikes, and it probably gave him that last round. But it was a close fight versus not the highest level guy in Akman. And I could see Khabilov getting the takedowns and implementing that classic takedown and lay and pray type of style, but I was impressed enough with Khandoz's takedown defense, and I think that the size advantage will be enough for him. Khabilov moving up 15 pounds to 170 in this one. I think Khandoz's will have a pretty good size advantage. He'll be strong. He'll be taller, possibly even stronger too. And I think that I like what I saw with his. He sometimes uses a judo throw to stuff the takedowns, and I think that that's actually what Carlos Diego Ferreira had success with. He used a lot of wizards, underhooks, overhooks to stuff those takedowns and just showed incredible takedown defense. So as long as Khandoz's is coming out here knowing he needs to counter some takedowns and land the hard strikes in the feet, I honestly think that he can win a decision in this one. And with both guys being Russian, you're not going to have that advantage for Khabilov like he did over Kajan Johnson. So I'm actually going to pick Khandoz's to get the 29-28 decision victory in this one. Not a confident pick, but at plus 175, I haven't bet him yet, but I probably will end up on Khandoz's for maybe half a unit to a unit. I just like the value and think that this one will be closer than the odds indicate, but not a confident pick by any means.
You know what? I'm changing my pick. I was very convincing. I'll take Khandoz's. I'll take Sergey to get the win. Now plus 170. I mean, it's getting up there where it's a line where if you think a fight's going to be close and you're getting plus 175, you know that maybe that's a line that you take. Khabilov is just such a neutralizer that I'd hate to, put money on Sergey here, and him just get taken down over and over again. But Khabilov moving up to 170, I don't think that's the move for him. So him fighting a guy so long like Sergey, it might give him some issues getting some of those takedowns.
Nice. Was able to flip the pick there, so that's a win. Last fight on the prelims, we got in the light heavyweight division, Magomed Ankalaev, who is 11-1, taking on Dalcha Lungabula, who is 10-1. The opening betting line for this one was Ankalaev, the minus 175 favorite, to Dalcha at plus 135. Right now, we are seeing Ankalaev minus 400 to Dalcha plus 325. So the most action out of anybody on the card is coming in on Magomed Ankalaev. I think rightfully so. I think you mentioned that you are pretty high on Ankalaev. So give us your rundown on why you're picking Ankalaev in this one.
Yeah. So how do you pronounce his Dalchi's?
I think it's Lungabula.
All right, I'm gonna try and do that a bunch of times. So
well, I say Dalcha.
Yeah, Lungabula. This is my boy. He's funny dude. I mean, I think his last fight against Daquan Townsend was just. I mean, Townsend is just not a UFC level fighter at all, and it was I think they fought at 205, where he typically fights at 185. I feel, but in this fight here, I think I don't understand that opening line. Ankalaev is a top tier to me, skill for skill wise, light heavyweight in the world. That Paul Craig fight, he was dominating Paul Craig, and to Paul Craig's credit, he was hanging in that fight and wasn't breaking, but he was dominating him and got hit that Hail Mary, first L. A lot of times big prospects first loss comes by submission. It's just a weird thing that happens often. I think they lose focus or whatever it is. He comes back though 6 months after. I was glad to see that. A lot of these Russian guys are pretty inactive, and I was glad to see him get back into the cage soon thereafter, and just wipes Marcin Prachnio off the planet with that head kick, and he just dominated him in that fight, and I was really, really impressed with him coming back. And in his last fight, Abreu's a tough good dude, and he rearranged Abreu's nose in that fight, and was really landing big on him and showing his complete MMA game there, and just dominated and got that decision win pretty easily. But I think Abreu's a legit fighter, and I don't rate him low, as we'll kind of get into later. And I just Dalcha Daichi, he's not going to be able to withstand the pressure that I think Ankalaev can put on him, because Ankalaev doesn't really have skill wise like that. I don't think he has too much to worry about here. He's the more talented striker, grappler, wrestler in every way, shape, or form that this fight, any area that this fight could play in. Ankalaev is going to have the advantage. I think he has a conditioning advantage. I think he's a stronger guy. And I feel that he's just so much more talented than Dalcha, where Dalcha is now. Can he get hit with a big shot? Anyone can, certainly. And Dalcha for sure has some power in his hands, but he's working on his game. It's not like he's a guy who's really bland and he's just like trying to knock people out with his striking. He goes for takedowns. He tries to progress position on the ground. He's legit. He's training, but I think this is way too much too soon for him. I got Ankalaev at -155 on Bet Online when it opened. I crushed that for as much as I possibly could, and they allowed me to. And it's indicative in the price now, where it's almost -400. It is -400. So I think Ankalaev goes out there, really puts it on Dalcha. I wouldn't play. Would I play him at 4-1? I can't advise someone to do that. His opener was gold. That's why sometimes you need to be on those. But I think he gets the win here, maybe by stoppage. But Dalcha looks like a guy who's pretty durable and can take a shot. But I think we're going to see Ankalaev dominate this fight.
Yeah, I think the books are going to get slaughtered on this one. That was a terrible opening line, and I'm sure there's tens of thousands of dollars of liability on Ankalaev. So, I mean, what you got in Lungabula is just a pure steroid athlete. I mean, nothing against the guy. He's a physical specimen, but the dude has muscles on his neck, muscles on his back, his shoulders have muscles. I've never seen, like, seriously, one of the most juiced up guys in the UFC right now. And I guess it's possible for him to just power out of Ankalaev's grappling and maybe land a hard shot on the feet, touch the chin of Ankalaev. Ankalaev doesn't have the greatest boxing defense, but I still think that his striking is good enough to avoid that big power shot. I mean, Lungabula is a bit dangerous when he blitzes into the pocket, like he knocked down Daquan Townsend with like a blitzing two-punch combination, but the difference in skill between Ankalaev and Townsend is more than night and day. It's Ankalaev is I think a combat sambo master of sport, international master of sport. They give those out in Russia like candy, but still, I still think Ankalaev is just a much better fighter at range, on the feet. He's got takedowns, top control, and I don't see him finishing Lungabula either. I think Lungabula is durable. He's tough. He's got decent cardio. He should be able to avoid getting finished in this one, but it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out, because if Lungabula blitzes him and tries to get him out of there in the first 60 seconds, he has a legitimate chance of pulling off this crazy upset. But I think if he tries to go technique for technique with Ankalaev, it'll just be a very prolonged loss for him. I mean, Dalcha looked decent in his debut over a subpar UFC subpar fighter. I think he will pick up some victories in the UFC throughout his career, but this is just not going to be one of them. I think Ankalaev picks him apart, and I'd say wins the decision 30-27, plays it real safe. And now the next fight, moving on to the main card, we got in the another fight where some discrepancy over the weight in this one. I'm pretty sure this fight is taking place at 205, although Tapology says 185. It's pretty rare Tapology's off, but there's a lot of discrepancies in the weights in this card. But I'm pretty sure this fight is taking place at 205. We got Shamil Gamzatov, who is 13-0, taking on Kattar-Zabit, who is 15-3. The opening betting line for this one was Gamzatov, the -270 favorite, to Abreu +190, and we are now seeing Gamzatov -185 to Abreu at plus 160. So I get the sense that you're going to agree with this line movement, that line margins have tightened up. I think that plus 190 line on Abreu is a bit wide. So what are you thinking about Gamzatov making his UFC debut, up a weight class, up 20 pounds versus a solid fighter in Abreu?
Yeah, I really don't like Gamzatov as a fighter overall. He is undefeated here. But in his fights, he's just he has fought to his strengths a lot, which who could blame a guy from doing that, right? Knowing how to win. But he's in good shape. I give him that. He's good shape, physical guy, but he just comes forward, puts out volume. He throws a lot of junk out there. I feel I'm not a particularly big fan of his striking game. I think he's very, very sloppy on the feet. I think he doesn't really have too much depth of skill on the feet. And as a grappler, I haven't been too impressed either. He doesn't really pursue the grappling too much, and I don't think he will want to here, because Abreu is I think the much better grappler here. I think he has the better flowing MMA game, and I think if Shamil can't get him out of there relatively early, I think that Abreu starts catching up to him as the rounds go by. As maybe Gamzatov gets a little more tired, and I think that Abreu is going to be. He showcased, I thought, well against Ankalaev, but wasn't able to overcome the advantages that Ankalaev was had in that fight, and the he couldn't get his takedown game going. Where I think here this fight might play out a little closer in closer range, and he's going to be able to shoot in, get the clinch, start working that, and hopefully go for some takedowns. That's what I'd be banking on if I was backing Abreu in this fight. The odds have come in quite a bit. Plus 160 still all right, but you could have got plus 180 or plus 175 earlier in the week. I like typically these Russian fighters when you're laying the chalk on them. It's typically because they have a big grappling edge. I feel not so much that they have the biggest striking advantage. And I think that on the feet, it's not. I think Abreu can connect and on Gamzatov here and be able to change the course of the fight. So I really wouldn't want to lay the chalk here with him. So I would play Abreu. I'm thinking about if I'm still going to take him at this plus 160 number. I would love to get it ticked up a little bit more, but I really don't think that's going to happen, because I think more people are going to be fading Shamil here than backing him. But do you have any strong feelings about this fight? I thought Abreu was great coming into his UFC debut, and I definitely did not leave that fight with less of an opinion of him.
Yeah, he's pretty underrated, honestly. If you look at his record, just the wins over Alvi and the loss to Ankalaev doesn't look too great, but he's very solid, very technical on the feet, doesn't try to overstep his bounds. He knows that his striking is pretty basic, but he keeps it technical, and everything that he does throw has some pretty decent boxing technique and pretty good defense as well. And Gamzatov is I'd say these two are actually pretty similar fighters. They both have pretty technical striking on the feet. Gamzatov throws a lot of lead hand strikes, throws a lot of jabs. Not the most technical boxing, but it's pretty effective. He threw a lot of output versus Eddie Gordon back in his PFL fight. But he just did not look very comfortable in the pocket exchanging. His defense suffered. It looked like he stiffened up a little bit, and he got caught with some right hands. So I think in the pocket, Abreu will actually be the more comfortable of the two, and we could see him land some hard shots. Abreu fought really smart versus Alvi. He picked his shots really well. He stayed technical. He stuffed takedowns. I think he maybe hit a takedown of his own at one point versus Alvi too, and he's got really good submissions on the ground once he gets there. So I think that this fight is much, much closer than the odds indicate. I'd actually say that maybe Abreu could be the favorite coming into this one. I think that Abreu will maybe throw in that left body kick of his in the southpaw versus orthodox matchup, And I think that we could see the two of them kind of neutralize each other a little bit and slow the pace down to a striking match where it could be a bit low output. And you got to think that Gamzatov will have the better output, and him being Russian, the scorecards probably go to him. But I actually think Abreu is super live in this fight. Definitely would not knock a play on him. We'll probably end up on him as well, like you were saying. Maybe just wait to see if we can get a better price on him, because the line's holding for Gamzatov. Surprisingly, I wouldn't see why maybe some more late action would come in on Gamzatov and get that last good price in Abreu. But yeah, let's pick Abreu to pull off the upset in this one. I think with the Gamzatov making his UFC debut up in weight class, I think Abreu might be a little too much too soon for him, and Abreu will pull off the upset decision victory.
I agree. I'm picking Abreu here to get a decision victory as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if he could, picks up a sub here as well, because Gamzatov is pretty aggressive. So
yeah, I think Abreu's a better grappler for sure.
Yeah,
definitely a bigger sub threat.
I could see a club and sub with Gamzatov too aggressive, gets clipped, and Abreu wraps up a neck somewhere.
Next fight in the welterweight division, one of the best fights on the card, in my opinion. I think the best fight on the card. We got Anthony Rocco Martin, who is 16-5, taking on Ramazan-Emeev, who is 18-3. The opening betting line for this one was Emeev as the favorite at -135 to Martin as the slight underdog -105. Right now, we are seeing Emeev -135, Rocco Martin +115. So, what are you thinking about this matchup, Ozzy?
This is one fight that I am interested in a lot, and I do have action on. These are two guys that I think are pretty similar to each other. They're very well rounded. They don't mind wherever the fight goes. Both guys. Martin on the ground, looks for more subs. Emeev, really, really good ground and pound once he's on top. But I think I like Martin here. I feel like Martin's been very, very underrated throughout his UFC career, and it's proven if you go through his win-loss record and see the odds that he was at in each of his fights, and he's coming off a loss to Maia there. No real shame there. Maia's a really, really, really tough puzzle to crack, but Martin stayed composed a few, where when the fight got difficult and tough, and was able to actually get a majority decision there, even though I thought it was pretty easily a Maia fight. But it's really tough to keep him off you and win that fight. Emeev, I've been really underwhelmed with his UFC career. His last fight against the lefty Skulik, Stefan, lefty last fight that he had over a year ago. I felt that there was a lot of points where he could have lost that fight. What stuck out the most to me was the footwork issues that he was having in there. Now, given that he was fighting a lefty there, but I saw a lot of setups that he got caught with, or positions times that he put himself out of position. Say when he was trying to cut off the cage, or he was trying to keep him in front of him to land his strikes. He was really getting outsmarted in a lot of positions, and was letting the fight really get away from him, and wasn't putting himself in positions to win or land the big strikes. And I saw a lot of close punches whiz by him that came about because of his lack of footwork. I think Rocco Martin's a guy that's going to be able to take advantage of that. He's really quick on the feet. Obviously, he's coming up. He's a former 155er, so I think he has a speed advantage here. He has really simple but clean boxing, which I think will be what he needs to establish early on. I am a little nervous about him getting caught with a big shot here, because sometimes he throws his punches out there. He admires his work, or he's not extremely defensively conscious. But on the feet, I think it's close. I think he has the better kicks. He throws to the legs, the body, and head, I think, better than Emeev does. And I think he's going to be better at setting those up. And I think that'll be a big important factor in making sure that he doesn't get trapped up against the cage, keeping his range with those kicks. And in the grappling exchanges, Emeev is a very good wrestler, but his ground game, his jiu-jitsu, his transitions are not good. I don't think he's going to be able to hold Martin down at all. And on the contrary, I think that Martin has very, very good jiu-jitsu on the ground, not only in hunting for submissions, but keeping positions, keeping positions, progressing positions, and he's really opportunistic down there. So like I said, I think he's a guy that, no doubt about it, has been underrated. I think he's still underrated here. I played him for like 1.3 units at the plus 140 number. And I think that he's going to pick up a win here. I really do. I think he's able to neutralize what Emeev does best and able to win this on the judges' scorecard. So I'm going to pick Rocco Martin for a close decision win. But I could also see him, if Emeev, picks up the pace, him, maybe finding a finish, because Emeev, all of his fights in UFC have gone really, really well. He hasn't faced adversity. I think all the guys that he fought, he had a big grappling and wrestling advantage, and I don't think he's going to have that here. So I want to see what he has to offer when he's a little bit more of when the fight's a little more even. And I know Rocco Martin is really experienced with fights that are that are close, that he maybe shouldn't win, or there's like some doubt. So I think he's going to come up with a good performance here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. I'm picking Rocco to win this one as well. And I'm a big fan of Martin, but I was trying to think of why. And it's because, as you mentioned, I mean, the dude is constantly an underdog, and he usually wins those fights or has really competitive fights as that dog. And he's picked up some nice victories lately, had a really successful transition to welterweight, and he's just fought grappler after grappler after grappler. This matchup is going to be nothing different for him. I think that Rocco's got the better boxing on the feet. He's going to be lighting up Emeev with calf kicks and body kicks as well. I think Emeev's striking is just a bit too rudimentary. He kind of telegraphs that right hand and he wings it forward. And Rocco doesn't have the best defense. He kind of has lackadaisical defense, gets caught with punches sometimes like he did versus Jake Matthews, but he can take a shot really well. He can stay off a bottom very well. I mean, he has really solid defensive grappling. Only the best of the best grapplers are able to hold him down, like Damian Maia. And I mean, guys like Sergio Moraes, other high-level black belts, were not able to hold him down, and Rocco beat those guys pretty easily. So I think that Rocco is able to stuff the takedowns of Emeev. If he gets taken down, I think he should be able to stay solid defensively. I mean, Emeev could win rounds by just laying and praying, sort of like Maia did, and it could be a bad loss for Rocco. But I think that Rocco is able to use that, maybe his butterfly sweep like Stefan Salukic was. I mean, Salukic was not a super high-level fighter, and Emeev did not have that much success holding him down as well. So I definitely don't think he'll be able to hold Rocco down. I say Rocco gets up to his feet, lands the better strikes in the feet. I think we could see a finish from Rocco, as you alluded to, but the pick has got to be Martin by decision. I just think that he's the better fighter here, and he wins this one on the scorecard. So the pick is going to be Martin, and haven't locked in any underdog action on him yet. You got a really good price at plus 140. I don't really know what I'm waiting for, but should probably lock in soon on Martin.
I mean, I think you might get a better price on Martin later. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are jumping on Emeev early on, and some of those guys are doubling down. So you might get a better price on Martin, but maybe wait it out, see if you get plus 120. But if you get that, just hop on.
And the next fight in the light heavyweight division, we got Ed Herman, who is 23-14, taking on Khadis-Ibragimov, who is 8-1. Khadis-Ibragimov opened the minus 175 favorite to Ed Herman at plus 135. Right now, we are seeing Ibragimov minus 145 to Herman plus 125. So I'll start this one off if you don't mind, Ozzy. This is a crazy line. I mean, Khadis-Ibragimov came in his first UFC fight short notice as well. He looked absolutely horrible. Seriously, one of the worst performances I've ever seen. The dude has no technique. He straight wings punches. He blitzed Da Un Jung, couldn't hit him with anything, gassed himself out, couldn't get any takedowns going, got outstruck, and got eventually tapped out in the third round. I mean, it was a pathetic performance. He had no technique when he was throwing punches. He had no control of his gas tank. It looked like it was his first MMA fight ever. So I really don't rate Ibragimov highly at all. He's coming in this fight again on super short notice. Ed Herman was supposed to fight Antagulov, so he's prepared for for another guy who comes out and blitzes you in the first minute. I think Ed Herman is up for the task, even though he's old, even though he's not the fighter he once was. I think that he's savvy enough to avoid that knockout, high guard, avoid that punch getting touching his chin early, and then Ibrahimov should really defeat himself. I honestly see Herman taking over after the 2-minute mark in the fight. Herman probably landed some hard strikes and likely landed a knockout. And it's crazy to predict a 39-year-old guy who's been fighting for 15 years to knock this guy out. But I really don't rate Ibrahimov highly. I think that he loses this fight for himself. I mean, Da Un Jung is a lot better fighter than Herman at this point in their career, and I could be not giving Ibrahimov enough respect. He could come out here, blitz Herman, and just touch the chin, and the fight's over, and all this analysis is for nothing. But I'm trusting the old dog in this one, Herman. I think he comes through as the underdog, and I got 1 unit on him at plus 130. So is this sounding similar to your line of thinking, or do I sound crazy, Ozzy?
Oh, man, I mean, you don't sound crazy at all. I have zero desire to bet on this fight at all, man. Like Ed Herman, I remember Ed Herman. I think he was one of the first guys I ever watched in MMA, because that's when I started training back in 2006, and I remember watching him versus Kendall Grove on the Ultimate Fighter finale. Crazy, it's been 13 years. In this fight though, it plays out two ways. Either Ed Herman gets slapped in the first round by one of the wild punches that's thrown his way how do you pronounce his last name? I'm so bad at it. Ibrahimov. So loses to Ibrahimov that way, or more likely what happens is he absorbs what Ibrahimov has to dish out to him, and is able to stay in the pocket and throw hooks, and able to follow up on them, and possibly knock him out in return when he gets a little more tired. I think people are thinking that Herman is washed up, but yeah, if you remember that Krylov fight, he got knocked out with that head kick that he didn't even see coming. It was a beautiful head kick by Krylov. But against Vellante, he wasn't put away. And then the time before that was against Brunson, and we know Brunson hits like a truck, especially in the first round. Ibrahimov, the performance he had in his last fight, he just looked clumsy. It was embarrassing, like you said, how he was kind of just chasing after the guy, throwing hooks and uppercuts. And I think he's a young dude. He thinks he I don't know if maybe that's the way he always wants to fight, or he just got jitters and perform like that. But plus money with Ed Herman, there's no way that you'd back Ibrahimov here. So I'm with you. I think Ed Herman probably absorbs some punishment here, but then ends up chipping away and getting the win here. But there's a big athleticism disadvantage here for him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get finished either.
Yeah, I understand passing on this fight too, but Ed Herman, I think, cashed for me as like a 2-1 dog versus Cummins, so I still got a little profit next to his name, so might as well just gamble it away here on another good spot as plus money. But in the welterweight division, in the next fight, we got Zelim Imadaev, who is 8-1, taking on Danny Roberts, who is 16-5. This fight opened up Imadaev minus 265 to Roberts plus 185. Right now, we are seeing Imadaev minus 220 to Roberts plus 180. So pretty shocked at this line movement, honestly, or where the line was set at all. Do you think this line's accurate, or do you think it's a bit off?
So I mean, Danny Roberts, man, he's a guy that is infuriating sometimes to watch. I remember there's a lot of fight in that Claudio Silva fight. They just couldn't believe like some of the stuff that was happening there. The line, I think, for definitely opened up too wide. If you remember Zaleem, his last fight against Max Griffin, Max Griffin was struggling to grapple with him and trying to grapple with him, so and getting hit with big shots, pretty often. So I think people think that he's going to come in here and just melt hot chocolate, pretty early on. But Danny Roberts is, he's a skill dude. I think he's not a bad fighter. He got murdered by Ferreira in his last fight, but for the most part, he's been a solid guy. He's really chinny. That's the only thing. We've seen him get stunned quite a few times. But I wouldn't want to back Zaleem here at minus 220. You definitely need that to be under 2 to 1. And I think if Roberts is staying at range with him, he's probably going to get knocked out. But his grappling is pretty opportunistic, and I think he's going to likely lean heavy on that to try and get this fight to the ground at multiple points, surprise him with some takedowns and start to chip away at that gas tank, which he did maintain it pretty well in the Griffin fight. I think he slowed a little bit, but not as much as I thought he was going to slow down, and ended up losing because Griffin was able to get in on his hips. So I think that'll be a focus for Roberts. But here I'm picking Zaleem to win this fight because I don't think Roberts has good enough wrestling or enough strength to be able to muffle the offense, to muzzle the offense of Zaleem in this fight. So he's gonna be my pick.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna. I don't know. I guess I'm picking Roberts in this one. I mean, you mentioned it. You summarized it all very well. I mean, I said this before. Roberts is one of the worst IQ fighters on the roster. His infuriating, frustrating. That's a great way to describe his fighting style. And I'm actually a little more confident in his defensive grappling skills. I remember taping him pretty heavily before the Claudio Silva fight, and I mean that fight was going exactly as I thought. He was narrowly escaping the submissions. He was hurting Silva. He just didn't have the smart capabilities to avoid the grappling, and eventually got sucked back down to the ground and armbarred in some weird stoppage. But I mean, it sounds kind of crazy to put money on the guy because he is just such a low IQ fighter. But I mean, there's value on this fight, no doubt. I mean, Imadaev, his UFC debut versus Griffin, all he did was throw spinning attacks and get up from takedowns. I mean, Griffin was attempting a ton of takedowns. Imadaev had great get-ups. He did not accept bottom. He got right up to his feet every single time he got taken down. And considering that he never fought in the third round before that fight, his cardio actually looked pretty good. I mean, he might have won rounds 2 and 3 of that fight and probably deserved the draw, but the judges gave it to Max Griffin. It was super close, but at range, I think Roberts would be the much better striker. He's a former pro boxer, kind of a crafty southpaw. He's got some good kicks behind him as well. And besides him being chinny and not having the best defense, he's actually a pretty decent striker. And I think his takedown defense, his submission defense is good enough that he will be able to avoid getting stuck on bottom. And I haven't really seen enough good offensive grappling from Imadaev to think that he can take him down and hold him down. So not really understanding the line in this one at all. I honestly think people are just fading Roberts, but I don't think Imadaev is the guy to do it against. I think at range, Imadaev has really no reliable striking. He's got really poor defense, and I think he could get countered and knocked out here. So in my opinion, I think the value is on Roberts, and I'm actually going to pick him to win by knockout here. I think Imadaev's defense is just so bad that I think even one of the dumbest fighters on the roster, Danny Roberts, can touch that chin. Or I honestly wouldn't even mind seeing Hot Chocolate get melted, like you said, just to see him go down in misery from all the frustrating times I've spent watching him throughout his career.
Yeah, you and me both. You and me both.
And that brings us to the co-main event of the evening. We got Alex Volkov, who is 30-7, taking on Greg Hardy, who is 5-1. The opening betting line for this one was Volkov, the minus 175 favorite, to Hardy plus 150. We're now seeing Volkov minus 290 to Hardy plus 245. So short notice replacement for Greg Hardy. He fought, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, decision win over Ben Sassoli, and now he's coming in here to fight Alex Volkov. That was an insane opening line. Alex Volkov at minus 175. It rightfully got smashed. Minus 290, I'd say that's more accurate where the fight where it sits now. I honestly would probably cap him closer to minus 400. I heavily favor Volkov in this fight. I'm not really sure why I see so many people picking Hardy and saying there's value on Hardy. So Volkov's a better striker at range, no doubt. He knows how to use his reach better. He throws better straight punches. He's got really good kicks. He's got a really high output as well, one of the best outputs in the heavyweight division. The only really bad things about Volkov is that he leaves his chin up in the air a little bit. He can be caught with big, heavy punches, which is why he lost his last fight. versus Derek Lewis, a fight that he was dominating and lost in embarrassing fashion. But I think that Hardy is not nearly as tough of a fighter as Lewis is. He's not as crafty. He's not going to be able to absorb that type of punishment and come back. So, I mean, if Hardy comes out here and blitzes him and tries to make Volkov uncomfortable in the first 60, 90 seconds, like he did in his really early UFC MMA fights, I think that Greg Hardy could touch the chin and knock Volkov out. But if he tries to go technique for technique and tries to win this fight via decision like he won his last fight, I mean, he's just going to be out techniqued by a long shot. Volkov's got the advantage in the grappling, huge advantage. I mean, Volkov has got really nice body lock, trip takedowns. I think that this fight Hardy will be blitzing into the pocket, throwing big punches. Volkov clinches him up, lands some good strikes in the clinch, and then he'll either choose to break from the clinch and keep this fight at distance, or he'll hit those body lock, trip takedowns, probably keep top position. And I'm really picking Volkov to dominate Hardy in this one. I think that Volkov does land one of those trip takedowns and then gets mount and TKOs Greg Hardy from there. So I'm going to go with a ground and pound TKO from Alex Volkov in round 2 of this one. And I understand the early action coming in heavy on Volkov. So I'll turn this one over to you, Ozzy. What are you thinking about this one? You disagreeing? Do you think there's some value on Greg Hardy in this spot?
I mean, Hardy's line trended down or in the last few days. Now it's closer to plus 250. At that price, I think it's heavyweights. It's maybe Hardy could pull something off, but I think Volkov, he's never really shown to be chinny all too much. Like he got crushed by that Derek Lewis right hand, but it's Derek Lewis. He knocks the fuck out of everybody. So I think Volkov is cognizant of what's going on here, and he's really not going to want to be the guy to he's not going to be able to want to be like the first top 10 guy, like legit dude, to lose to Greg Hardy. So I think he's going to start the fight off slow. He's going to keep Hardy at range, and I just don't trust Hardy to be focused and diligent enough with his attack to be patient and and beat a guy like Volkov on the feet. And like you said, on the ground, if Volkov is tricky on the feet and he has good clinch, good takedowns, I could see him taking Hardy down. And if he does, Volkov is a far superior grappler. So it's a Hail Mary shot with Greg Hardy. I don't think the range that Volkov is able to keep with his kicks. You've never seen Hardy really deal with someone who's able to chop at his leg, hit his body, and throw head kicks. And Volkov has those sneaky front like teep kicks as well, which I think will be tough for Hardy to deal with. Hardy has great attributes. He's fast. He has power. So he could definitely catch Volkov, but I really don't see that happening. I think Volkov gets it done here. Getting close to 3-1 favorite. Yeah, I don't really play 3-1 favorites like that. So he'll have to be under 250 for me to even think about it. But I'm probably gonna sit this one out. I never predict heavyweight fights all that well, but in this spot, I really don't see how Hardy's going to have someone be confidently picking Hardy to win this fight.
Yeah, so we're in agreement with that one. So do you think you've seen like an abnormal amount of people picking Hardy and saying that there might be a little bit of value, or do you think that's just me?
I've seen people picking Hardy, and I have like a little resource where on Bet Tips MMA they show a little bit of like how many like the percentages, and I think for sure Hardy's had the more percentage of bets placed on him on the card between these two guys. I feel so. I think definitely there's people on Hardy.
Yeah, I get the bet personally because you're picking the number, right? You're picking the guy with the big upside, the guy who's looked good, he's got the UFC promotional push versus the guy who's older, who's coming off that knockout loss. And I get betting and has also lost as a favorite before multiple times. So I get that. But in terms of picking Hardy to win the fight, that's a little puzzling to me. But moving on to the main event of the evening, a 3-round main event in the featherweight division, we have Zabit Magomed-Sharipov, who is 17-1, taking on Calvin Kattar, who is 20-3. The opening betting line for this one was Zabit minus 270, Kattar plus 190. Right now, we are seeing Zabit minus 290 to Kattar plus 245. So that more action coming in on the heavy favorite Zabit in this one. I'll let you start this one off, Ozzy. Give us your thoughts on this main event. 3 rounds in the featherweight division.
So great fight. Disappointed that it's not 5 minute rounds. I think it'd make it even more interesting. But this is a fight where I think Kattar is being really overlooked here. Zabit, he's a good fighter, but I think he's extremely hyped up. In his UFC career to this point, can you say that it's impressive? He hasn't really fought too many guys that are that good, and even in the fights that in those fights, he hasn't really looked that impressive. He 3 of the guys that he's beaten in the UFC aren't going to be in the UFC anymore. When you count Kyle Bochniak, who I think is going to be getting cut soon, but Mike Santiago, that guy's been submitted 8 times in his MMA career in his 12 losses. Zabit finished in the second round, and I didn't think I think Mike Santiago was able to do some stuff in that fight. It wasn't like one-way traffic all the way. The Moraes fight, Zabit had a huge grappling edge, huge physical advantage. Moraes used to fight at 135, and Moraes, if you can put him on the ground, you're going to beat him. He only really wins back and forth stand-up exchange affairs. Bochniak fight, it's kind of legendary for Bochniak coming back in that third round and starting to bust Zabit up a lot. Bochniak is almost like a 500 fighter. I think his official record is 8-5. The fact that Zabit had a little bit of trouble with him was not inspiring to me. Brandon Davis is able to escape some takedowns, was able to get some stuff going on the feet and land shots. And Davis is back down at 135. Of course he got caught. I'm not gonna say of course he got caught in one of those in that knee bar that he got caught in, but that's a move that you really get if a guy's pretty weak. I maybe not, but all the way. But Brandon Davis is not a strong grappler, and in that Stevens fight, Stevens is coming on. I thought that fight, I watched it again, and it was kind of closer than I thought it was. Contrast that with Kattar. Kattar is really impressive in his UFC career. Has fought a lot of tough guys, Feely, Burgos, Moicano, Fishgold, Lamas. So Fishgold being the worst guy on there, and he was like 17-1 when he came into that fight. But there hasn't been one guy on that list, including Moicano, where Kattar has come in and wasn't able to land his hands. He has some of the best boxing in the UFC. He's incredibly quick. He sets up his punches really well. He has great built-in defense with his punches, and he's able to reset into defensive positions pretty well. You see that some of the setups that he has, like that Shane Burgos knockout, where he just has that timing. Once he gets to your timing, he's countering really hard, and he's able to follow up his punches incredibly well. Zabit, I don't think is has amazing control and jiu-jitsu. He does have great takedowns, but he doesn't really stick you with single legs and double legs. It's really him getting to the clinch and like squeezing and taking you down. I don't think Kattar is going to be accepting of takedowns, and I think that Zabit being reliant on that clinch to take fighters the fight to the mat is going to start catching up with him after that first or second takedown, where Kattar's getting back up. He's not letting Zabit stick him on the ground, and he's making Zabit consistently fight for that clinch. And that range, man, I feel, the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is Zabit, does use his kicks pretty well, but Kattar's cognizant of that, and he's going to be countering. He's going to be in Zabit's face. I don't think Zabit, it backs up a lot and circles a lot, so he's not going to be in position to utilize those leg kicks, right? You really need to be on that front foot if you want to land kicks. Only other thing I'd be concerned about is Zabit does have he has good hand speed. I'll give him that, and he chambers his strikes pretty well on the counter. So I could see him maybe countering and hurting Kattar on the feet. But I think this Kattar I'm going to pick Kattar flat out, straight up here. I think that he comes out with a aggressive boxing game. He knows that this is his moment. You know, he's a veteran of the sport. He started fighting a long time ago, but he's getting up there in age, right? He had his first fight back in 2017, so that's 12 years ago when he was 19. He's 31 now. It's time for him to ascend into that top 10 and, you know, maybe become a title challenger. So I think he knows that, he's aware of that, and you know, he's training with a group of good guys, and I think we're in for a big performance from Kattar, and I think that he can get the stoppage on Zabit, because I haven't seen Zabit really plugged with a hard shot or with a guy that's coming at him aggressive with knockout power. Stevens tried, but Stevens, he's not good enough, man. He's a journeyman. He wasn't able to cut Zabit off. He wasn't able to capitalize when he did land on him. And Bochniak is the only other guy that really came at him aggressively, and Bochniak just doesn't have any knockout power. Kattar, if he touches that chin, I think he's going to stun Zabit, and he might be able to pick up a stoppage win, but I'm picking him, and at plus 250, I think there's tons of value on Calvin Kattar.
So early on in the fight week, I was thinking that the value was on Kattar. Then I watched some tape on it, and I was thinking that the price was justified. And then now, you know, hearing that argument from you, I'm thinking that there's some more value on Kattar. So kind of going back and forth in this fight. As a pure pick goes, I think I definitely have to pick Zabit at this point. Just kind of trying to feel what my opinion on the line. I guess that I would feel more comfortable betting Kattar as the underdog as opposed to laying that chalk on Zabit. But so the path to victory for this one for Kattar is going to be his boxing. Like you mentioned, I would say that it is the best boxing in the UFC. You said some of the best. I mean, I really don't see who is better right now with their hands than Calvin Kattar. And it's just, I wish he would have a little bit more layers to his offense, because right now all he does is really throw hands. He throws out that occasional front kick to find his range, but I think he would really benefit from maybe developing his clinch game a little bit more and throwing more leg kicks. But in this fight, his boxing is what he's going to need to use. He shouldn't be throwing kicks because he's going to get taken down off that. He shouldn't be initiating the clinch because Zabit will be better there. Zabit will be better on the ground. He should have a pretty big wrestling and grappling advantage. And I do think that Calvin Kattar could win this fight. He's just going to have to put on a really good game plan, and he's going to have to jab inside. He's going to have to get into the pocket with Zabit, and he's going to have to find home for his hands. He's going to have to work the body of Zabit, try to punish that suspect gas tank of Zabit, and it's very possible he could target the body. He could land some good shots and outbox Zabit, possibly to a decision. But if Kattar's winning this fight, I'd say it's by knockout. Although, I mean, it's tough to say. Zabit does have the Russian judges in his favor, but Kattar really could land the better strikes, land those hard punches on the feet, and win this fight via scorecards too. But I think that where the biggest difference in this fight comes is via the grappling, and I think that if Zabit really chases the takedowns in this one, I think he will look like the minus 300 favorite, because Zabit attempts 6 takedowns a minute, and he really has a vast array of takedowns. I mean, not so much the typical shots that we see from American wrestlers, or like single legs or double legs. He's more trip takedowns and clinch takedowns, and he's just really crafty, man. He's extremely creative in that octagon, and I think that once he starts flowing, he makes the reads on his opponents. He really is one of the most exciting fighters to watch in the UFC right now. But a really good point you mentioned about the level of competition. I definitely think that of the 5 UFC fights they've had, there's no question that Kattar has fought the better competition, and by a very wide margin. I think that, like you said, I think Fishgold might be better than Davis, Bochniak, and Santiago. So Zabit's really only impressive wins, in my opinion, are he dominated Marias, and then I guess he snuck by Stevens. But as you mentioned, that was a close fight. I mean, 5 rounds, I think he loses that fight. He definitely slowed down a little bit. Once Stevens found his boxing range and pressured him, and got him tired, Zabit's movement suffered, his defense suffered, and in round 3, Zabit is definitely a huge liability. So I could see Kattar implementing the best game plan of his life, working his boxing, winning this fight via knockout or decision. I could see him maybe losing the first couple of rounds and then capitalizing on Zabit fading in round 3 and maybe win by comeback knockout in round 3. But I have to favor Zabit in this one. I just think that on the feet he will be using his kicks, his backwards movement, and his footwork to just give Zabit so many looks. He's going to be kicking the legs, the body, attempting takedowns. He also has some pretty good counter boxing as well. So I just think on the feet there will be so many layers coming at Zabit that it'll be a little too much for Kattar. And I think Kattar really doesn't have a good answer for kicks sometimes. You watch the Andre Fili fight. Whenever Fili would throw that, switch to that southpaw stance and throw that left body kick, it landed, and Kattar didn't really have a good counter to it. He was kind of slow at countering the kicks. So I believe that Kattar does have a win condition. It's a pretty strict one, while Zabit has a lot more ways that he can win. So I'm going to pick Zabit. I'm going to favor his output, favor that grappling advantage, and I think that he wins this fight via 29-28 decision. But it'll be close, and it's a damn shame this fight's not 5 rounds. We really haven't talked about that much, but if this fight was 5 rounds, I think the line would be so much closer. I think a lot more people would be picking Kattar, possibly myself included, if this were 5 rounds. It's a damn shame it's not. But the pick for me is going to be Zabit by decision. Any last thoughts you wanted to add on to that analysis, Ozzy?
Yeah, so I mean, just the reason I kind of don't feel the same way is I just don't think that while Zabit has everything in his bag, I don't see him utilizing it. I don't like putting out there as much, because he does have suspect cardio. And I think Kattar, man, he's like talking about like he feels like this is like a Rocky movie. He's coming into Russia. I think he doesn't give a shit about what Zabit's going to throw out there. He's going to come in there, work his game, and he's going to find a knockout. I really feel there's literally, look back at all the Kattar's fights. There hasn't been one guy where Kattar has not been able to find a range and really start landing his hands. And I think the Zabit, if you watch him, he likes to kind of paw at people's punches a lot, and that's what did Lamison in his last fight. If you see the Kattar knockout, Lamas is kind of having his hands kind of far away from his chin, trying to kind of parry punches away, and Kattar was able to take advantage of that really quickly in the first round. And I think the same thing is likely to happen, or will need to happen for Kattar to win. But I predict that Kattar sees that he's got a smart camp, and I think he's gonna capitalize on it.
Yeah, very possible. I mean, I would be excited to see it. I mean, as much as I like Zabit, I'm a big fan of Kattar too. It would be incredible to see him pull off this victory, and I think you're getting a really good price on a great matchup. I mean, if you have to pick a fighter to beat Zabit, you'd want it to be a good boxer, a good pressure fighter, a guy with some slick, accurate hands, and that's what Kattar is. So it really could be a nightmare matchup. I could be wrong on this one. You could be right, and that's going to do it for the podcast this week. But we broke down all 13 fights. It was a great time breaking shit down with you as always, Ozzy. Hope to have you back on the program soon. And any last thoughts you want to add real quick?
Yeah, just follow me over at Ozzy_MMA. Post stuff there throughout the week, and not just looking forward to making some money this week, and hopefully have a look at some of our picks here. Hopefully they're able to make some people some cash.
Nice, man. Thanks once again for coming on the podcast. We'll definitely have to have you on more in the near future. But thanks for joining me, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you all enjoyed the card this weekend, and we will see you all next week. Peace.